Why is it that we often show more grace to total strangers or to coworkers and even our pets than we do our own spouse? I mean, think about it. The cashier messes up your order, you smile and say, "Oh, no big deal." Your friend cancels your plans, you say, "Don't worry about it." Your dog chews up your socks, you post a cute picture of him on Instagram, give him a little treat. But your spouse makes a mistake, uses the wrong tone or forgets something important, and suddenly we're offended, we're distant, and now we're keeping score. Isn't it crazy that the one relationship that needs the most grace often receives it the least? And if we don't change that, if we keep withholding grace from the person that we promised our life to, resentment will quietly destroy the very marriage we once prayed for and longed for. So coming up in this video, I'm going to show you 3 powerful things that can completely change the way you experience marriage, and why the real problem in your marriage might not be lack of love, but lack of grace, and why showing grace to your spouse is absolutely essential if your marriage is going to survive every season and every change. And 3 simple, practical ways you can start showing grace starting today, even if your spouse isn't doing the same thing yet. Because when you understand grace the way God intends it, it doesn't just improve your marriage, it can transform it. I remember when I was a teenager, my parents helped me open my very first checking account. Back when writing actual paper checks was still a thing. Some of you might remember that. And let me just tell you, I was terrible at balancing my checkbook. I mean, I'm not a detail person, so I'd forget to write things down and I'd spend it without thinking about it. And every month, like clockwork, I'd overdraft that account. And if you've ever overdrafted, you know that little $5 sandwich now suddenly costs you a $35 fee. But my parents were brilliant. They set me up with overdraft protection, which meant anytime my checking account ran dry, the bank would automatically pull money from my savings account to cover my mistake so I wouldn't balance a check. I mean, I still remember looking at that bank statement, and it literally said, "Funds transferred from savings to cover overdraft." And one day it hit me. That's exactly what grace does in marriage. Because marriage works just like a bank account. Love is the deposit, kindness, connection, laughter, good days, that's you putting something in. But misunderstandings, frustration, short tempers, disappointments, those are all withdrawals. And let's be totally honest, some days your spouse takes out way more than they put in, and some days you do too. I'm the same way. And when there's no grace in relationships, that account goes bankrupt really quick. And that's when couples say things like, "I'm done. I'm exhausted. I have nothing left to give." But grace is that overdraft protection for your marriage. Grace says, "I see the mistake, but I'm not going to let this bounce. I'm going to cover it because our relationship matters more than this moment." That's a really important mindset. See, love builds your marriage, but grace keeps it from collapsing. I'm going to say that again a little slower because that's something we all need to get. Love builds your marriage, but grace keeps it from collapsing. See, most couples think that their marriage problems come from not loving each other enough. But here's the truth. You can love someone deeply and still be tired, frustrated, and disconnected, because love and grace, they're not the same thing. Love is a feeling and a choice, and grace is how you treat each other when love is hard to feel. You can say, "I love my spouse," but still roll your eyes at them, speak harshly to them, or punish them with silence. Why? Because love without grace, it turns into scorekeeping. I did this, you didn't. I said I'm sorry, but you haven't. I put in way more than you. See, love may start your marriage, but only grace sustains it. Love says, I care about you. Grace says, even when you fail me, I won't give up on you. Colossians 3:13. It says this, bear with each other and forgive one another. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. So that phrase, bear with each other, my grandma would have said, hey, y'all need to put up with each other. Every healthy marriage has moments of putting up with. Not because your spouse is perfect, but because grace makes room for their humanity. And without grace, even strong love, it's going to eventually dry. With grace, even in weakness, connection can grow. All right, so let's get real for a minute. We're really selfish people by nature, aren't we? Whether we admit it or not, most of us walk into marriage thinking, how will this make me happy? How will my needs get met? Will this person support my dreams? And then when our spouse doesn't meet those self-focused expectations, we feel justified to get angry, or we feel justified to withhold affection, or punish them with silence, or even think, maybe I married the wrong person. Here's the truth. Every marriage is made up of two imperfect, changing people. So no matter who you marry, they're not going to be the same person in 5, 10, 20 years. Their personality might change. Their interest will change. Their body will change. Their needs, their fears will change. They might even lose their hair. Their energy levels, their passions, even the way they show love. All this is going to change. And guess what? So will you. All that'll change about you too. Which means if your marriage is only built on, I'll love you as long as you keep being who I want you to be, then it's only a matter of time before disappointment turns to distance. See, without grace, every change, it feels like a betrayal. But with grace, change becomes an opportunity to grow together. Dr. Tim Kimmel said it perfectly. Your marriage will have a tough time making it without grace, because love may draw you together, but only grace keeps you together through every season. So Ephesians 4:32 says, be kind to one another, be tender-hearted, forgiving one another. How? As God in Christ Jesus forgave you. So kindness, tenderness, forgiveness, that's grace. Without it, your marriage turns cold. But with it, even the hardest seasons can become the most beautiful chapters of your story. I know it to be true. I love this quote by Dr. Kimmel. He said, ironically, the relationship in our life that most needs to be saturated in grace is the one in which grace is the least experienced. He goes on to say this, we often show more grace to our coworkers, friends, and pets than to the person we agreed to share an underwear drawer with, a bathroom mirror, and a credit card. Why is that? Because somewhere deep inside we think, my spouse should know better. They should try harder. They should meet my needs. In other words, we give grace to everyone else, but we expect perfection from the one person who vowed to be with us till death. But here's the spiritual problem with that. We freely receive God's grace, but we're often reluctant to extend that same grace to our spouse. Dr. Kimmel says it's a contradiction for a Christian to gladly receive grace from God, but refuse to offer it to their spouse. Guys, let that sink in. This isn't just a marriage issue. This is a discipleship issue. When I withhold grace from Bonnie, I'm not just hurting her. I'm misrepresenting Jesus. If the grace of Jesus, if it lives in us, it should flow through us, especially to the person we said I do to. So by this point, most couples, you're probably thinking, okay, I get it. Grace is important. But what is it? What does it actually look like in marriage? All right, let me make this really simple. Grace is desiring the best for your spouse even when they don't deserve it. Grace is when you say, I'm going to treat you based on God's love for you, not just your behavior towards me. Did you get that? Grace is saying, I'm going to treat you based on God's love for you, not just your behavior towards me. But let's clear something up. Grace is not ignoring sin or problems. Grace is not being a doormat. Grace is not letting your spouse walk all over you or pretending that everything's fine or stuffing down your emotions. No, that's not grace. That's avoidance. It's a whole other thing. Avoidance leads to resentment. Grace is choosing connection over punishment. Grace is giving the benefit of the doubt or believing the best about their intentions. It's responding with patience when they're weak. It's speaking life even when you're hurt. And it's creating a safe place to fail and to grow. See, grace doesn't mean that there's no boundaries. Grace means you handle the situation with the heart of Jesus. Because here's the truth. Grace isn't a feeling. Grace is a decision. It's a decision to love like Jesus when it's least convenient. So it's a decision to forgive like Jesus when it's its absolute hardest. It's a decision to offer another chance, just like He did for you, and just like He did for me. Grace is when you stop treating your spouse as your enemy and you start treating them as your teammate again. For some of you watching right now, the only thing standing between you and a real breakthrough in your marriage is the decision to extend grace to your spouse. So if grace is that important, how do we actually live it out practically, daily? All right, I want to give you 3 simple, powerful ways to show grace to your spouse starting today. And here's the best part. You don't even have to wait on them to go first. All right, first, show grace in your tone. You can say the right words in the wrong tone and still do a lot of damage. Tone sets the temperature in your home. So a cold tone, cold marriage, right? Warm tone, safe marriage. So Proverbs 15:1 says that a gentle answer turns away wrath. So that's not just talking about the answer you give. That's talking about the tone in which you give it. Give it gently, right? And that'll turn away wrath. Grace sounds like, hey, are you okay? Or I know you didn't mean it. Or let's figure this out together. See, your tone can either build a wall or it can build a bridge. So second, show grace in your assumptions. See, most conflict doesn't come from what really happened. It comes from what we assumed happened. And grace says, maybe they were just tired. Or maybe they're overwhelmed. Or maybe it wasn't personal. Instead of assuming the worst, assume the best. Because most of the time, your spouse isn't trying to hurt you. They're just human, like you are. Colossians 3:13 says, remember, bear with each other, or in Southern terms, put up with each other. It gives some room for imperfect moments. We want those for ourselves, don't we? See, grace gives space for humanity. All right, third, show grace in your response. And this is a big one. Grace isn't proven when everything's good. Grace shows up when your spouse blows it, when they forget, or when they're short with you, or when they're disappointed with you. In that moment, you have a decision. I'll either attack, I'll punish, I'll withdraw, I'll keep score, or I will respond like Jesus responds to me. Sometimes grace is taking a breath before reacting. It's that pause and pray. Sometimes grace is asking a question instead of making an assumption. And remember, when you ask the question, remember tone. Grace is offering help instead of blame. It's praying for them instead of criticizing them. Grace doesn't ignore the problem, guys. Grace chooses a godly response to the problem. So imagine where both of you in your marriage relationship actually live this out, where tone is gentle, assumptions are kind, and responses are full of mercy. A home where mistakes don't lead to distance, but they lead to understanding. A relationship where you don't have to pretend to be perfect. Why? Because grace, it gives you the room to be real, to be human. A marriage where love is strong because grace keeps it safe. That's what God's grace can do. And if you're listening to all this and you're thinking, okay, I want to show more grace. I know I need to show more grace, but honestly, I don't always feel like it. Let me encourage you. None of us do. Grace doesn't start with willpower. Grace starts with Jesus. You and I cannot constantly give grace to our spouse or consistently give grace to them unless we're first receiving grace daily from Jesus. Because grace isn't a personality trait, right? It's not about being a nice person. Grace is a supernatural response that comes from being close to Christ. The closer you are to Jesus, the more naturally grace will flow through you. So, if you truly want a grace-filled marriage, the next step isn't just trying harder. The next step is putting Jesus first. So that's why in this next video, I want to show you exactly how to put Christ at the center of your marriage in practical, daily ways. So you're not running on empty. You're pouring out what He is pouring into you daily. Because when Jesus is first, grace becomes natural and your marriage becomes unshakable. So click right here and watch Putting Jesus First next. This is the key that unlocks everything we just talked about.